an illustrious team of people who are looking after the finance, people who are looking after money issues, people who are looking after the economy. We are going to be looking at financial deepening, and we are asking the question on how the economy is doing amidst the COVID pandemic. Some countries are now in wave 3, wave 2. Wherever we are, the economy might be good, might not be good. Certainly, there are many discussions going on about the status of the economy. To discuss all that, I have the Honorable Minister David Bahati. He is Minister of State in charge of planning in the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. David, you're most welcome back to the show. Good to see you again. We have Mrs. Rashmi Pillai. She is the Executive Director or CEO of Financial Sector Deepening Uganda. You're most welcome, Pillai. I hope I've mentioned the name correctly.
Absolutely.
Good, thank God. I don't like spoiling people's names. We also have, seated right on the right of Pillai, we have Mrs. Emma Mugisha. She is Executive Director and Head Corporate and Investment Banking at Stanbic Bank, Uganda. You're most welcome, Emma.
Thank you, Charles.
Good to see you. And finally, we have Mr. not yet Honorable, Mr. Ramadan Gobi. He is a lecturer. He teaches economics at Makerere University Business School, Nakawa, MOBS. Ramadan, you're most welcome back.
Thank you, Charles, and good evening to the listeners and the panelists.
Good. If you want to join this debate, we are streaming live via Facebook and on radio. We are on UBC TV, which is on Facebook. That's for YouTube. But we are also on YouTube, UBC Television Uganda. You can also join us live through Magic 100 FM. But we are also on Twitter via the Twitter handle of this show. That is hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. Hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. You can send us your questions. You can send comments so that in the course of the discussion, we shall be sharing them with the panel that is here. They are very eminent and they are going to answer and respond to all your questions one by one. The earlier, the better, so you can join the discussion and be part of it. Before I just came in, let's start from the basics. Before we even go into the real detail. Let me start with the Pillai. Financial deepening. Someone would say, we are used to GDP, we are used to economic performance, we are used to inflation, but this animal financial deepening, briefly first unpack it for us. What is it? What do we understand by financial deepening if we are talking about even an ordinary Ugandan?
All right, so we will talk from the perspective of an ordinary Ugandan. The question is, what can the financial sector do for people and businesses? And for people, we are talking about how are we helping you increase your take-home income? How are we helping you build your resilience so that you can save more? How are we helping you as the financial sector to increase your business and to grow your business, so your access to credit? How are we reducing your resilience to shocks through insurance? And how are we helping you build long-term assets so that you don't go back into old age poverty? If we are able to do all of that, we have deepened, the financial sector has played its role for people and businesses.
Good. Very good point to start us from. Honorable Minister, you are in charge of the economy. Most importantly, you are in charge of planning. Are these things being done from what Pillai has said currently from government side?
Yeah, thank you very much, Charles. First, can I join the rest of Ugandans in sending our condolences to the people of Tanzania on the death of our dear friend, President Magufuli, who has in the last just 6 years made an impact on the continent, especially in the fight against corruption, but also in the speed at which has been implementing projects in South Africa to uplift the standards of Tanzanians on the continent. So we want to really send our condolences. In terms of financial deepening, as our sister has said, one, we of course we liberalized our economy, and because of that we attracted a number of commercial banks in the country. As we speak now, we have over 22 commercial banks in the country. We have a number of microfinance institutions in the country who caters for the needs of those that cannot be handled by the big commercial banks. We also know that there is need for even those huge institutions like people involved in manufacturing and others. That's why we remained with despite the fact that we had liberalized it, we remained with the Uganda Development Bank, where we channel our development support to different sectors in the economy. There are those who cannot go to UDB. There are those who cannot go to commercial banks. They are now, we established what we call the Microfinance Support Center to support Ugandans and companies across the country. And recently, as we'll be speaking about this in a few minutes from now, we also established what we call a myoga, so that if you can't go to a commercial bank, you can't go to Uganda Development Bank, you can't go to the Microfinance Support Center, we reach you through the circles at the sub-counties and actually at the village level. And coming to that next financial year, we are now going again to strengthen another model that we'll be talking about. And also government has a lot to play in terms of policy environment. And we passed a law to allow banking agency banking. Now you can actually open a bank in your saloon. You can open a bank in your trading center. So because of that policy environment that we have tried to improve, we are deepening, not only deepening, but also widening the financial sector. Then the mobile money is one of the other things that we have tried to the telecom companies, facilitated by environment of government, to deepen the financial sector. And we continue to support all these efforts to make sure that people can access and transact in the financial sector. The challenge that remains is what our sister will be talking about, because when we liberalize it, one of the things that we thought was going to happen was to bring down the interest rates. Instead, they actually came up, and they are stuck up there because
You're
now
referring to Emma.
I'm referring to, yes.
You get put on the spot.
We need to be clear, because that is a big question that she has to answer.
Yes, so and because of that, the businesses have been struggling. Because to get a loan at an interest rate of 24%, and then you have to have your operational costs and put on the margins to get a profit margin of 10%, 15% is a big hassle because of the interest rate. So we thought that when we liberalize it, we helped the sector, the financial sector, actually to bring down the interest rates, but that has not worked. And that's why we are now focusing on capitalizing UDB, putting more money in a myoga, putting more money at the parish level, putting more money in a microfinance support center, so that we can help especially small and medium enterprises to access cheap capital, because the cost of capital is very, very, very important in developing the country.
Good. Emma, let me start on that point where the minister leaves it. And just help us to understand the dynamics in the market, especially the banking industry, and how it is doing, and what are those problems that are affecting it that makes it hard for them to lower interest rates. The cost of capital is very expensive for Ugandans as we talk now. what exactly is happening? And we're not blaming you as Stanbic Bank. We just want to understand from your perspective how the industry generally is performing.
Okay, so let's start with the cycles of interest rates, because it's not just the banks that determine interest rates. It's part of a whole economic, it's part of the economic ecosystem, yes. So normally, Ugandan interest rates, if you notice, have a 5-year cycle, and usually it's around elections, actually. Usually at election time, we have interest rates go up. You find...
Why at election time?
It's
politicians over borrowing?
No, there's a bit of government spending during that time, but then there's also a pulling out or a pulling back of investors to kind of see how things go. Okay. Now, one of the benefits of COVID, interestingly, because COVID was not all bad, was this election cycle, we actually had the lowest rates ever. And the policy, the economic policy, Minister of Finance, Bank of Uganda policy was to keep rates as low as possible to try and encourage economic growth. So obviously the spending also around elections was not as much as normal because we had COVID. So there was one benefit from COVID in that this time the economy did heat up like it normally does. There was no the usual inflation that also leads to interest rates going up. And so this particular cycle rates remain low. The rate at which banks borrow from central bank has been at 7% for the last 6 months, which is the lowest ever. So this is the right time for rates to actually come down. But that's not the only factor that affects rates. The other factor is obviously the cost of borrowing, the cost of running a bank, the credit credit risk that we run. If you look at this particular COVID cycle, we had to restructure a lot of loans, and actually this year is when you see the real impact of COVID, because we kind of kicked the problem can down the road by restructuring the loans, but at some point you can't restructure anymore. So you have to now face the customer and say, are you going to survive or aren't you going to survive? So this year, in most of the bank's financials, you see the cost of COVID actually on the economy. So there's all these things that affect the cost of money. But as we speak right now, actually the rates have really come down. If you see the average lending rates are no longer in the 20s, it's now about 18%. From a Stanbic perspective, our lending rate is at 16%. As we talk now. As we speak now. So the rates have actually come down. And the central bank continues to lean on us as a financial sector to reduce our rates. And as we go into digitization and all this, the cost of running banks will come down. But of course, that cost will also mean there will be less jobs and other things, less branches, more of the digital. So as the cost of running financial institutions come down, the cost of lending will also come down. Okay, good.
Mr. Gobi, there is one aspect that keeps going round all the time, and when we were, posting, alerting our viewers about this discussion, someone who is a business lady called Julie sent me a message and said, Charles, please, this is a good discussion, but ask those guys why we don't feel the economy, why we don't feel anything they are talking about. Are they flying above us all the time with their good economic indicators and all that? So why is it that Honorable David Bahati and his team speak so well, gloriously, about the economy doing well, and if there is a challenge, it's not so bad, but people are saying we don't feel it in the pocket? What do you relate to that?
Because of the anomaly of measuring economic progress. Anyway, I think the truth of the matter is these are not very good times economically, everywhere in the world, not only in Uganda. And almost in every single country in the world, they are helping people to stay afloat. At individual level, at household level, at business level. There are those stimulus packages you've been hearing different governments talking about. Here in Uganda, we have our own way of surviving these kind of shocks, because we have a massive subsistence sector which keeps us, going, and it has been keeping us alive. But when it comes to money, people are broke. That's the truth. Many people are broke. Okay, when I say people, someone who with the money may say, what is that one talking about? Most of the people are broke, and it is on account of course, what happened with this pandemic. And for us, we have had 2 pandemics here, as maybe some countries had one. We have had the
election,
the pandemic of politics, feeding into the other pandemic.
Why do you call politics pandemic?
Ours is usually terrible. It brings what she has been talking about, the wait and the see. And this time, it was, characteristic of chaos and a lot of uncertainty. We are actually lucky that it has ended quite peacefully. Kudos to the government to keep that stability politically, but it had led to a lot of withdrawal of by the business people and the investors in terms of the certainty of where the economy was going. When you look at the Bank of Uganda business tendency index, you see a lot of executives thought that things would be quite bad. So, of course, the economy of Uganda was hit hard by the pandemic. I think the minister presented that very well in their reports, different reports. Our GDP growth was cut by a half. And many times when we economists talk of GDP, people say, but that GDP, what is it? We don't eat GDP. No, we eat GDP actually. GDP is important because everything that we consider critical is correlated with the GDP. What is that GDP? It's what we have produced and its monetary value. If you have had a pandemic causing a lockdown and then this curfew, right now the economy has stopped. Everybody is home. There are no bars. There are no these things which people used to do. So definitely that's when GDP is cut, and the GDP means economic activities have been cut. So has been cut by half almost to 3.1 or something like that, and that translates into money disappearing from the economy, because GDP cutting, or reducing, means that people are having less access to opportunities to make money. So it's not a surprise that people are not feeding the economy. Of course, the economy was cut by half in terms of its growth. Although in absolute terms, we could be still having an economy which is big and growing at a relatively slower pace. And this financial institution is also risk averse. They don't want to lend to us the way they were lending to us, for example, around this time last year. Because of a number of reasons, the businesses are not paying back the way they were supposed to pay back. They have restructured most of their loans. So I think overall, it's understandable everywhere in the world that people are not feeling the economy the way they ought to feel it. And I wouldn't want anyone to say that the economy is good right now. We are doing well. I don't think there's anything like that. But of course...
But shouldn't we be first desegregating between the challenges we have financially or economically prior to COVID and those that came because of COVID, in order for us then to task the Honorable Bahatis that this, you have an excuse that we can listen to, but this has always been part of us.
Pre-COVID, of course, much as we were growing at 6+ 6+%, which is quite a big percentage to grow. You know, non-economists, when they hear 6%, they say, what is that? Only 6. We should celebrate that. Yes, it is a very big growth rate. Much as we are growing, we have certain binding constraints in this economy. And one of them, which I think you have ably started on debating it, and the minister put the banker on spotlight, is interest rates. The price of money in this country is very high. We shouldn't even say, you know, now it has reduced a bit. It is now 18%, 16%. You know, that's too high. Because elsewhere, now, actually, COVID has cut interest rates in negative. In some countries, when you borrow, you pay back less than what you borrowed. That's why they are no longer lending, and they are looking for places where they can dump this money, you know, because money now is becoming a problem for them in Japan, in some of those European nations. Now, for us, like the minister said, economists told us, the neoliberals and some monetarists, that if we liberalize the banking sector and we stop government from controlling things and also guiding the banks on how to lend, then we are going to attract more financial institutions, and they compete and they reduce the interest rates. I'm in the business of plotting curves, looking at data, and I plot curves for my students. Every time I plot that curve from 1983 through 1994 when we liberalized, to now, the curve of lending rate is like a plateau.
Flat.
It hasn't changed much. Okay, there are some few volatilities, which she's talking about, a few years, you know, then a few months actually, not years. By and large, interest rates have proven to be sticky downward in Uganda. There are, of course, a number of factors leading to that, and those are the things the minister should be attending to. The cost of these banks doing business, the fact that up to today, Ugandans are not fully traceable. Ugandans can disappear. Somebody borrows money and it disappears.
Is that so, Emma?
Yes.
You find that somebody brings a land title and it is fake. But the land office
Has the details.
Has confirmed.
had confirmed at the beginning that this title is okay. But then later they find there are 3 people who own the same title.
Okay.
So the cocktail of factors which, of course, explain these interest rates, because these banks, in order not to lose money, they have to embed all of those costs in this thing called interest rate.
Okay. Honorable Minister, I wanted you to also answer the question of Ugandan concern, the large concern that people don't feel, to a large extent, the growth or the improvement in the sector in their pockets. And do you envisage that improving and changing for the better soon?
Yeah, first of all, let me say something about the performance of the economy now.
Yeah.
As you know, we look at it from 2 angles, at the macro level and then at the micro level. Despite the effects of COVID, everybody understands that COVID in one way or the other affected the economy. But despite of that, our economy has actually remained resilient. Because if what Goy was talking about, the projected growth of 3.1%, it has been growing at now for this year 2.9%. And that is from the 7% before COVID. But some nations, some countries have actually gone into negatives. Some countries have gone into negatives. When you look at the inflation, what we normally call the fundamentals, Charles, when you go to the hospital, the health experts will talk about the fundamentals. Is your heart pumping well? Is your kidney working? We also do that in our economy. how is the price, how are the prices moving. So the inflation has also remained stable. The exchange rate, as you can see, actually the shilling has appreciated from 3.7 to slightly below 3.6. The interest rate, though, we must do something about the commercial banks, but we are now seeing people going to the private credit. We are seeing people going to start getting loans because the private credit stock was at 16.9. Now it's at 17.5. It has increased in billions, meaning that there are some activities going on. So we see that the fundamentals, the macroeconomic fundamentals, are in place and are stable. And as you know, COVID provided challenges, but at the same time, we saw a lot of opportunities in this situation. For example, we know that this is actually the greatest opportunity for us to do import substitution, to produce the things that we have been importing, produce them here. And that's the reason when we are doing the stimulus, the support to the private sector, we increased our support to Uganda Development Bank by 1 trillion, though we have now released 481 billion, so that we can help the manufacturing sector. And we see that it is growing. In this period when we were suffering COVID, our coffee exports increased. The gold, you know, and one of the major contributing factor is gold. The exports in minerals increased, and one of the factors is gold. When His Excellency the President provided leadership on this matter, we have seen gold refined here and exported, and it has become one of the largest exports that we have. So at the macro level, we remain stable. We need to do more. But at a micro level, we need to work hard to make sure that we can put money in the empty pockets of Ugandans. The reason why you're asking people don't feel it, because money is got from two things. Either you are selling your service, like you come here to moderate this. I hope that you, at the end of the day, you are paid and
I'm doing national service.
And you do something with URA. I'll cross-check that. Or you are selling a product. So we must, that's why the NRM government has said in the NRM manifesto, we are going to continue focusing on wealth creation and job creation. People must get jobs and people must create wealth. When we talked about the subsistence level, in 2014, 68% of our households, out of 8.4 million households, 2014, we discovered that when we asked them what they were engaged in, 68% said we are engaged in subsistence farming. During the household survey in 2016-17, after 10 years, we do a census. Every 2 years, we do a survey. So during those 2 years, we are now asked to say a different question, but related to whether people can actually meet the basics of life within their household. And we have now discovered that 39% of the household, out of 8.5 billion, are in subsistence. And out of those, 62% of those are in subsistence are in subsistence farming. There are also those who work, they do work, you have a job, but you can only get what to eat, and that's it. You can't get what to save and invest. And that's where the next budget is going to focus. And because we want to get people from subsistence into a money economy, we have looked at different models. You recall, Charlse, that this financial year we have invested 260 billion in Emyoga to help people who want to get cheap credit, who are engaged in some form of trading, to get some money to do business. Because commercial loans had become a big problem because of the interest rates. So this coming financial year, we are now focusing our effort at a parish level. We want to invest money at a parish level, that you have a revolving fund. If you want seedlings, you can get everything at the parish level. We invest in collecting statistics so that we can monitor how the households are doing. So there are a number of interventions that we are going to be focusing on to make sure that we lift people from the subsistence level to the money economy, to create jobs, because when you create jobs, that's why you see, Charles, we are focusing on the issue of industrialization, because people will get jobs when they have factories. People will get jobs when they engage in enterprises, whether it is farming or trading, to put money in their pockets. Government will not give you free money, but government will enable you to do business, either in farming, to do farming, either we are creating an environment to put up factories, or to add value to what you are producing so that you can make money. And I have no doubt that under the leadership of President Museveni, with this renewed mandate, and I must say that we are very grateful for the support that we received from the people of Uganda, and on a selfish note from the people of Ndogwa Western Kabale district, for giving us a new mandate so that we can serve them better. So I think that we are going to really focus more on the household income, so that people can put money in their pockets.
I'm going to come back to you on this issue of the interventions that you need to put in order to trigger some growth. But for now, I wanted, I need Rashmi to weigh in on the mismatch. If the minister is saying that there is, at a macro level, it looks to be doing well, and yet at a micro level there is some challenge, and indeed people are saying that we are not seeing it in our pocket. For me, that would really be the focus. That should be really what should concern us. Why are we not seeing it in the pocket? So in your view on that mismatch?
Sure. Thank you for asking that question. It's extremely pertinent. So as FSD Uganda, what we did is we actually did 5 waves of surveys. We surveyed more than 1,000 people between April 2020 to end of September 2020 to understand the impact of COVID on their lives. And Charles, in April, at the height of the lockdown, 85% of the primary income earners said that they had significantly lost income. So if you compared April 2020 to April 2019, they had lost a lot of income in comparison. And that situation improved as we tended towards September. But in between March 2020 to September 2020, what a household would have earned versus what they earned the year before in 2019 was significantly less. So the answer to Julie's question when she asked you online of we are not feeling in the pockets, the economy contracted. That's the long story. I mean, putting it simply, the economy contracted. We in fact have 2 quarters of very, very sluggish growth, which is a very politically correct term to say that we had negative growth. So everybody felt that. In our last survey, what is important for you to note is that we asked a simple question. We went around and asked more than 1,000 people, if you were able to, can you raise about 100,000 shillings or maybe 120,000 shillings in an absolute emergency within 7 days? And I think about 60% of the respondents said no. We would not be able to raise 100,000 shillings in 7 days in case of an absolute emergency. So, and why would they say that? Typically, where would you get that emergency funding from? You'd get it from your networks of friends, families, etc. You would borrow it informally, or you would get it from digital applications like MoCash or somebody else. But everybody's social networks were strained. Everybody was in the same situation, and it was dire. So we can talk about, you know, it's great that the fundamentals are good and we should feel great about it, but the devil is in the details. And we need to discuss those details, otherwise we will not be cutting to the problem. Now let's also talk about
I just wanted to find out where the locations where this 1,000 were.
It was across the country. We did telephonic interviews. We did not violate any protocols. We were compliant with social distancing.
No, I'm not asking about that. Rather, I'm trying to get us to understand
the sampling.
The sampling.
Yeah.
But even more importantly, because you see, to get a solution, you must know the problem.
Yeah.
A solution starts from identifying the problem.
That's correct.
And locating where those problems are. Was Kampala most affected? Because what we are usually told is that, you see, the villages are not so affected because they eat from the garden. Now, I want us to learn from your knowledge whether that is so, and to what extent which areas are most affected and that kind of thing. So that then we can task the minister and his team who are following this discussion that this, you need to go back and do more homework in order to get for us a solution.
Okay, I will answer those questions as long as we don't make me the villain of this discussion.
No, not at all. Not when I'm here. I'll protect you.
All right. Did urban centers get affected more? The answer is yes. But the initial hypotheses that many people had was that rural centers would be relatively protected. The data on that is mixed. What happened, and Ramadan will hopefully corroborate with me, is when we went into a lockdown, there was an artificial increase in commodity prices. People started hoarding out of fear. So there was an artificial increase. Suddenly, when big institutional buyers like schools, hospitality, etc. stopped, commodity prices just completely crashed for a certain period in time, and then they stabilized. But this has an impact on smallholder farmers, on producers. So there has been a decline in that income. And just to say, yes, they are largely resilient, but not talking about how compromised that resilience has been, then we're not going deep enough.
Okay, very interesting there. Which brings me to Emma to try and corroborate some of the facts. I think I read somewhere in a report, financial report, I think in one of our local newspapers, that actually banking went higher than initially, even in normal times. Confirm for us that, and what could have led to that.
Deposits went higher, yes. So
what could have led to that?
So money that you'd usually use for trading, the trading was curtailed. So that means the money stayed in the bank. Where you'd have imports, so imports reduced drastically, that money stayed in the bank. Where you are going to pay school fees and some of these other costs, that money stayed in the bank. So yes, we did see a raise in deposits, in stable deposits, as opposed to having your usual churn, because the economic activity, again going back to that GDP growth, that usual turnaround of money reduced drastically. So you had more stable deposits. So if you think about it, the person who owns a hotel, their working capital stayed still in the bank, and probably just kept dropping a little bit as they were spending it and eating on it, because now what happened is capital was starting to be eaten, and reserves started to disappear in that perspective. So that was the reason why we had deposits going up. It was because the normal churn, if you're in Chikubo, usually sometimes for a few days your money is in a box under the, this time there was no Chikubo, so it was in the bank.
And note that the number of people now entering the banking market have increased.
No, not really.
More people banking.
No. We did see more people turning to digital banking. So we had always been telling our customers, go digital. But now, because there was curfew, there was transport, you couldn't go to the bank, then customers started to actually request. In fact, they would call you and say, that password that you were telling me about, how do I sign on? So we saw customers move more to digital banking, which was a good outcome, because there's really no reason to be in the banking hall in a line in this day and age. You can actually do everything on your phone.
Okay.
So the behavior is what changed.
Okay. Let's move to another area which is so much in debate, Honorable Minister, starting with you. The issue of the exponential rise in our debt, the public debt increasing. Is it, and I was looking at, I think the World Bank International Debt Statistics, and which showed from around 2012, within East Africa, Kenya, both, really Kenya, Tanzania leading, and then of course followed by Uganda. But in terms of growth, the two are much ahead of Uganda, and Uganda is slackening at a certain level, like there is no growth, it's so small compared to how much they are borrowing. Why is there that mismatch? Tell us more about the public debt as we talk today.
Thank
how
you
are we
much.
doing?
I just wanted to first comment on the food production that she talked about. I think we should do, sister, we should also look at it from the other way around, that we are blessed that actually we had enough food during this COVID.
Yes.
It is true that when the schools closed and there was this lockdown, the prices came down. That could be one of the factors. But also, it is true that we had enough production because of the interventions we had with the OWC, giving people seedlings, and it's a blessing that actually we had food. If we didn't have food, it would be really a crisis.
Agreed.
So that was one of the advantages that actually brought the resilience to our economy, because food prices can cause a crisis in an economy.
Yep.
So to have had enough food in the country during this COVID helped our economy become resilient.
Agreed.
The public debt, Charlse, again, we have said here before and in other places that debt itself is not a bad thing, but what you do with the debt is whether it is at a personal level or household level or at a country level, what you do with that debt is what matters most.
True.
The structure of our debt, if you can see, out of 100 shillings we are borrowing, 85% of it is going into developing the infrastructure. And as you move across the country, Charlse, you and those who are listening and watching us, you feel good that now the infrastructure are happening, that you can move from Chisoro up to Koboko by tarmac road. When you move across the country, you see a lot of those things happening, especially in infrastructure. Previously, our budget was skewed towards recurrent budget. Now it is towards development expenditure, meaning that we're investing in a number of development projects. Our revenue, which is a source of paying this debt, when you borrow, you use your own money as a country to pay back the debt. What will probably, since all of us are here in finance, what we look at as liquidity ratios. When you borrow, do you have enough cash to pay back what you have borrowed? So we pay using domestic revenue. That's what we monitor all the time. We don't want to reach a stage where you borrow and then you borrow to pay the loan. That becomes a big problem.
Isn't that what is happening?
And that is in check. That is really in check. And that's why we came up with a debt sustainability strategy for the country, and agreed that we are not going to go beyond debt to GDP ratio, meaning the amount of money that you borrow. Can your economy accommodate it? Can it hold it? Can it do something with it? for production, and we said we should not go beyond 50% as East African community. Now, if we put everything that we have borrowed, including the money for standard gauge railway, we are now at 49-point-something%. But Kenya, as you have heard and you know, is beyond 60%. Burundi, we are actually the lowest now. We are the lowest in terms of indebtedness, in terms of that ratio. So the other point that we, in the strategy that we looked at, was we should not go beyond domestic debt, which is very, very expensive, because most of the external debt is from concessional. Concessional meaning World Bank cheap money, 1% to 1.2%, 1.5%, and that concessional loan forms a big part of external debt. The rest is commercial, and commercial are those projects that really have not been supported by the World Bank and others, like Karuma that we got for these Exim bags. But the rest is really a big part of the debt is concessional. Domestic is what also we look at mostly. In our strategy, our debt sustainability strategy, we said we should never go beyond 15% of the loan portfolio, the debt portfolio we have. We should not go beyond 15% of the debt portfolio coming from the domestic debt, because domestic debt means we are competing with the private sector, including these commercial banks. So, to me, the debt, people have argued, economists like Ramadan and others have been arguing that we are going up. You remember recently the Auditor General also raised a red flag that we are coming up. Yes, we know we are coming up, but at the same time, in the short run, we must get this money, invest it in the projects to generate a growth, so that in the long run, we have money to do our own things, money of our own. Just this afternoon, I was in the Committee of National Economy and the Committee of Budget. We are borrowing from the domestic market 480 billion to finance our share of equity in the oil company, to be able to finalize the final investment decision for the oil companies, which is a key source of revenue that we are looking at in the next 5 medium term. So such decisions are very important. So Charles, you are going to make you can't fear to take a pill that it is sour, because you will not get the...
Because it has to stop the pain.
It has stopped the pain. So we must get this money now, invest it in the right investment, in right projects, to be able to grow our economy in a few years from now. So I want to assure the country that actually our debt situation is not as bad as people project it. Our debt is sustainable. We have not gone beyond what we promised the East African community of debt to GDP 50%. We have not gone beyond that. And our debt is doing the right things. One of the risks...
That's what I wanted you to also dwell on. I think, and I think strongly that when I listen to people complain, both the experts and ordinary Ugandans, they are not complaining that we are borrowing per se. They are complaining that on what are we really doing with what we are borrowing. The issue of misallocation, the issue of the pilferages, you know, that are in the pipeline of this money being used, and especially in procurement processes and all that. That is what, for me, I would wish that you respond to and allay the fears of the people on.
Yeah, one of the weaknesses, because where we find a problem, we should point it out. And one of the problems we've been facing in managing our debt has been the performance of the projects we borrow for. That has been one of the challenges. And the reasons why we have been facing that, and we are correcting it, was issues of compensation, for example. You borrow money, but you need money to compensate, as you know, and some of these things take time. You find that you want to pass a road here, somebody gets a value of the land through the government valuer. You are promised to, by government valuer, to pay maybe to get 100 million, but you want 300 million. And that delays the project for 6 to 5 months. So the issue of compensation has been delaying these projects. The other issue, and we attempted to bring an amendment, Charlse, as you know, to the House to amend the Land Act, but was very much resisted by members of the House, and we want to attempt to look at it again. The other issue,
because that again goes back to the issue of the trust, and because which is one of those things that as government you have to really work on. That if you have a population that is now mistrusting the managers of the country, then there is something that you have to twitch. And can you twitch that is what the new government, like you said rightly, that there is a new administration coming up, and that new administration should face that kind of mistrust and say, hey, come and see what we are doing. We want to show you this is what we have done. And so that
I really don't know, as a lawyer, when you use the word mistrust, I don't know what you know what you mean. And I think it is
it is actually the plain language.
It's a serious issue. When you see a government being voted in for 6 times, you don't say that is mistrust. I don't think so. So I think that is something else. So the other point, which is which we have discovered as delaying projects, is decision making and management. And this time we are going to have sanctions. If you borrow money as an accounting officer, don't implement the project. We want you to be responsible as an accounting officer. We have also seen other things, factors that are affecting the performance of these projects. The other issue has been procurement. Take an example of Karuma, which was a key project, Karuma Dam, a key project to help us reduce the cost of doing business, electricity, and others. But Karuma, we took 2.5 years to procure a contractor. In the middle of procurement, you have somebody from Nebi who probably has never even heard about, I know people of Nebi know about dams, but I'm just giving an example because that's where you come from. They are hearing you, and they are my good friends. But somebody from nowhere comes and says, no, I'm petitioning. I want administrative review on an important project like that. It takes 2.5 years. A key project implementing the NRM manifesto, but also the National Development Plan. So what have we done about that? We have proposed the amendments in the PPD Act, and one of the things we wanted to do was to cap the procurement period. We want, if you start a procurement, finish it in 3 months. If it's a dam, whether it's buying an aircraft, finish it in a dam. So these factors that have affected the implementation of our project have actually contributed the poor performance of our debt portfolio, and they are the things that we are working on. And we have seen the last 6 months, when we have really been focusing on this, we have seen the performance increase from 25% in some projects to 40%. There are projects that we borrowed money 4 years ago, they have not started. And they are very few in number, and we are working on them. So the performance of these the projects has also been a problem, and we are addressing it. So that's the only challenge that I see, and that's the challenge that we are addressing. But moving forward, the money we are borrowing, we are putting it in the right projects to benefit the country, and we think that if we handle these impediments of implementation of the projects, we'll be able to move.
Okay, we have lots of questions and comments coming online. I wanted to bring in Emma and Rashmi again, but let's take a quick break. When we come back, I will then start with taking us to the interaction with the audience out there through the questions and comments they are making. So many of them have already come in. Continue sending them, and then we will get back to responding to each of them as they come in. Continue sending the messages, the questions, and your comments. Keep them short, concise, so that then I can read as many as possible. If they are long, they will take a lot of time, and I will drop them. But let's take that break.
No one should stop you from finishing what's yours. That's why MTN gives you data bundles that don't expire. Load MTN Freedom Bundles using My MTN app and enjoy the freedom to finish your data bundles.
MTN.
Today tastes like a new tradition, like an old favorite. Tastes like all hands on deck and all eyes on the prize. Today tastes like a piece of the action, and it never tasted this good.
That's their way of stopping HIV. What about you?
Today tastes like a new tradition, like an old favorite. Tastes like all hands on deck and all eyes on the prize. Today tastes like a piece of the action, and it never tasted this good.
Welcome back from the break. This is Behind the Headlines, and this Wednesday, the 24th of March, 2021, and we are discussing financial deepening. And the question is, how is the economy doing, and can it be triggered to cause more growth? And can that growth be felt in our pockets, in the ordinary person's pocket? We are talking about the match or mismatch between the macro and micro performance of the economy. And in the studio we have the Honorable Minister David Bahati, in charge of planning in the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. We have Mrs. Rashmi Pillai, Executive Director of the Financial Sector Deepening, Uganda, and Mrs. Emma Mugisha, Executive Director and Head of Corporate and Investment Banking at the Stanbic Bank Uganda, and they are joined by our own Mr. Ramadan Gobi, who is a panelist on this show. Let me start with, there is someone here called George. We will be responding to some of these questions as we go along with the discussion. George says, please, Charles, inform the Honorable Minister that people of Lango don't feel the infrastructure development. They have the least, referring to Lango, that they have the least kilometer of paved roads in the country, and Kamdini Lira Road is a huge shame for the nation. That is what George is saying. And then another person called Arthur K. Arthur says, Charles, thanks for the show. Kindly ask the minister why they borrow money before planning for it. Thanks. And then there is Tinka is talking about, I saw it here. Let me read it. Tinka Simire says, the problem with the Mioga money is that its management is not watertight. Those people who can afford commercial bank loans have also invaded the Mioga money. They are now leaving nothing for the poor to borrow.
Indeed, invasion.
Of what that they have invaded a Mioga money. Honorable Minister, you can take note of those to start with as I go through the other comments, but bring in Emma first. On the minister referred to the local borrowing, domestic borrowing by government. I wanted you to weigh in a bit on to what extent that